Welcome to Purpose 360. I'm Carol Cohn, and today more than ever before, companies, brands, and their partners need to stand for something beyond the bottom line. I've created this program to provide insights and ideas to share with you so that you can apply them to your work the very next day. The goal here is to up-level your purpose and to benefit companies and society. So please join us. Today, we're going to talk about one of the biggest innovations in business, the B Corp movement. It may be one of the most important innovations in business today. The B Corp movement is about creating a new kind of company that has a triple bottom line. It has a bottom line that supports people, planet, and profits, and it's baked into its DNA. We're going to talk to Chris Marquis, who is a PhD professor. He has studied business and entrepreneurship, and he is perhaps the foremost expert on the B Corp movement. Chris, in 2010, was approached by a student in his class about social entrepreneurs. And the student said, "Hey, do you know about the B Corp movement?" And Chris, he really said, "I don't." And he went and he studied it, and he got hooked. Today, there's over 3,500 B Corps around the globe, over 50% outside the U.S., but they have one common goal: remaking capitalism to be fairer, to be more just, to be more inclusive, and as well to inspire innovation. So let's get into it. Welcome, Chris.
Wow, what an introduction. Thank you so much, Carol. It's really such a delight to be here and really looking forward to talking to you.
It's going to be great because you don't have to convince me. We just want to convince our listeners.
Right.
Chris, in addition to all of his cases, his courses, he has dozens and dozens of recognitions and awards, but he has something really exciting coming up. He has a book coming out called Better Business: How the B Corp Movement is Remaking Capitalism. It's a compelling look at the B Corp movement and why socially and environmentally responsible companies are vital for everyone's future. And it's coming out on a very special day. Chris, can you talk about why September 13th is the launch day for your book?
Yeah, sure thing. So September 13th, 1970 is when a very important and influential essay appeared in the New York Times Magazine. It was by Milton Friedman, called "The Social Responsibility of Corporations is to Increase Profits," which I hope sounds like a shocking phrase to everyone on this this podcast. I recently read the article, and he says things like companies that promote diversity, companies that try to do well in their community, are just basically suckers for liberal discourse, and that they should forget about all those things and just focus on the shareholders. This essay, set off, it sort of sounds like just some academic writing, but it set off really a sea change in corporate governance and the priorities of corporate America. Before then, before the 1970s, companies were much more community focused on their employees, people had good pensions. And since then, companies have really focused a lot on shareholders primarily. And 50 years later, 2020, so the 50th anniversary of this, I'm hoping that with this book and many other people are doing, it helps reorient capitalism to something that's much more stakeholder driven, not shareholder driven.
And I can feel for you, Chris, because when I started linking companies and social issues in 1983, nobody believed me. I mean, American Express did, but nobody else did. And trying to create a movement, which is what the B Corp movement is trying to do, all the B Corp entities and B Lab. It's not easy, and you toil for months and years and such. Then all of a sudden, to your point in the introduction to your book, you say the zeitgeist shifts. And so I want to give a little bit more of an introduction about the B Corp movement, and then we're going to really dive in. I'd also like to say that everyone listening has to buy this book. Jerry Greenfield is one of the co-founders of Ben and Jerry's, and I met both Ben and Jerry when I was part of the Social Venture Network years ago. Better Business is the book to read if you want to put values and purpose at the center of your company. It's an inspiring book with great insights to share. And then one of my favorites, Patagonia, Rose Macario, who unfortunately is leaving, but she has done such wonderful, wonderful work at Patagonia. She said Better Business is an important blueprint for how businesses can and should be both successful and a force for good. So the B Corp movement, it's not small. I went on their website last night preparing for this. There's over 3,469 companies that have become certified in 150 industries in 74 countries around the globe. And I think that, Chris, you point out in your writing that it's not just the U.S. at all. The 50% are outside the U.S. And I love it that the B Corp folks say they have one unifying goal. I'd also like to say in transparency to our listeners that when I was at Edelman running their Business Plus Social Purpose practice, we got contacted by the folks at B Lab. And they said, well, we are going to now register in Delaware. And for all of those in the corporate world know that Delaware, when you register there, that means that you have been accepted. And they were very excited about it. And it was a small piece of business, but I knew how important it was. I had to convince Richard Edelman it was important and the financial services team. But it was a phenomenal launch. And I think it was one of those seminal tipping points where the B Corp movement was getting another step along the way to being mainstream. So why don't we get into this? Let's just get into Chris, just a little bit about your background and how did you get fascinated about social enterprise and different forms of capitalism?
Yeah, sure. So as you mentioned, Carol, for 10 years before Cornell, I was at Harvard Business School. And I think a lot of the influence to me on my social focus came from my time there. There was a vibrant social enterprise initiative headed by sort of both of our friends, Cash Rangan and Dutch Leonard, Jim Austin early on, who I'm sure you knew well. And having that group there that really was able to, offer classes, get students interested in social issues was something that I gravitated to and learned a lot from. So I started teaching a class, Commerce and Society. It was a class that previously Cash had taught in, and then we also taught the case study that we worked on together on PNC Grow Up Great. And over time, though, as I taught that class, the students started to sort of push me to study more entrepreneurial firms. So in the class, when I started teaching it, it was companies like PNC, IBM, Goldman Sachs, Timberland, Western Union. And one day in class, I think it was around 2010 or so, one of the students says to me, we're studying all these large companies and these CSR programs are great, but we should be studying small companies with social missions embedded in them, like B corporations. And I must admit, I was a little embarrassed because I didn't know what B corporations were at that time.
Oh my God, a student knew more than the professor.
Yeah. Well, that happens. That's the great thing about the case method. You learn a lot from the student. And I went back to my office and I Googled and got in touch with the B Lab people. And then 2010, I wrote the first HBS case on B Lab and really reoriented my class to be much more social enterprise and social entrepreneurial focused. And did a lot of other cases on small and medium, not so much big, companies that had a social mission really deep, like Patagonia, like you mentioned, is a good example.
And so what was it like writing that first case? And you said it was about B Lab. So
Yep.
really, trying to understand Andrew and Jay's approach. And you must have had the same kind of experiences I had when I talked about, social impact, social purpose. In the day, way back in the day, it was cause marketing and cause branding. People looked at you kind of weird.
And not only that, but we were coming right out of the financial crisis of 2008. So I took over the class that was mentioning to you around then, maybe around 2007 or so. And I remember one of my colleagues at HBS said to me, he said, "Oh, I'm so sorry you started that class because, with the financial crisis, the companies must have cut everything back and no one's going to take your class." And actually the opposite. Like I think what we're finding, now with all the problems with the pandemic and systemic racial issues that are becoming to the fore. These are times when actually leading companies actually in many times double down and show their commitment to society. And so the course really took off after then. And when I reoriented around the social entrepreneurship and social enterprise.
And what was your feeling in those early days about the potential for this movement to take hold? Or were you thinking, oh, it's just those little tiny companies. It's back to, the Body Shops and the Ben and Jerry's and the Tom's of Maine?
I think that the B Lab founders, and also there's a third one, in addition to Jay and Andrew, there's also Bart Houlihan. And I remember talking to him once, very early in our discussions. And he said something, it's a generational play. And I think that, if you look at how, sort of companies, how they evolve over time, companies actually go out, even the largest companies go out of business frequently. New, smaller companies start and grow. And so I think what they were thinking initially was, okay, we'll start this. They might be small now, but these companies 20, 30 years from now will be very large. And I found actually, I was really taken by their vision. And I must say, it was when I started researching them, there were 300 B Corps. And I remember one of the discussions we had in class, one of the case discussion pastures was, will this work for large companies? And basically the consensus was it would not. And, today's another interesting day. So just today, if you go to the Stanford, today's actually August 13th, I realize we'll probably publish this later. But if you go to the Stanford Social Innovation Review website, at the top of the page is the cover article in the fall issue, which is the title of How the B Corp Movement Goes Big. And it's an excerpted chapter from my book, where companies like Danone, Unilever, Laureate International Education, Natura are adopting the B Corp model, and many other large companies now are adopting it. And so it is something that has evolved in a way that I think very unexpected to how originally it was envisioned, but a way that large companies now, and Danone, I think, is the real pioneer in this, are able to sort of adopt it effectively.
Yeah, that's what I'm hearing in the industry, that they're looking to Danone to really, is Danone the next Unilever?
Right.
I had some conversations with an ex-Unilever person about that. So for those listeners who, they've heard of B Corps, but they really don't understand it, can you do a really brief Cliff's Notes about what is a B Corp? Sure. What are, how do you register? How do you know if you should register? What are the requirements and such?
Sure. So a B Corp is a company that has a certification. So you get a certification to be a B Corp from B Lab. Similar to fair trade or organic or LEED. And while those are on products, the B Corp certification is assessing the entire company. So looking at the company's, consumer operations, environmental protection, employee protection, suppliers, community, et cetera. And you have to go through an assessment process, part of which is a survey that you complete about your organization, its impacts, its policies, its standards, et cetera. You have to get an 80 out of 200. It's a very rigorous survey. And then if you get over that threshold, you then actually have to go through some verification with B Lab. Part of it is they check a certain percentage of your answers. a certain percentage, maybe, I don't know, 1 out of 5, they actually do a more full-scale audit. So it is sort of verified and certified. And then every 3 years you have to recertify, which is another, difficult process. So that's sort of the process of how to become a B Corp. I should also mention there's a second innovation, which I think you were just speaking about with your earlier work around Delaware launched at Edelman, is the B Lab founders. So Jay and Andrew and Bart, the folks we mentioned, they realized when they started this change journey that if you're gonna change companies through this certification process, you really need to also change the underlying sort of articles of the corporation. So they also work with state governments around the U.S. because corporate law is based in the U.S. state. And over 35 now U.S. states, Washington, D.C., Delaware, Puerto Rico, have adopted this innovation. Delaware is the big kahuna in some ways of U.S. corporate law. So what Delaware adopted a number of years ago, which was sort of the big deal, and then a lot of foreign countries look to Delaware for their law. So Italy now has benefit corporation law, Colombia, Ecuador, Canadian province of British Columbia. So benefit corporation is a legal type of company like a C Corp or LLC. B Corp is a certified a certification that companies can get. So they're related, but sort of two separate things.
So do you have to file if you get your B Lab certification? Do you also then have to file for registration if you are in one of those 35 states?
That's correct. So if you are certified as a B Corp, one of the requirements is that if the legal jurisdiction of your headquarters has benefit corporation law, you're required within a certain period of time. It's a number of years to become a benefit corporation, which is a challenge for some companies.
Mm. And isn't there also in the bylaws that you have to codify more rigorously what you will be doing?
Exactly. So if you can be a benefit corporation does that for you. But if you're in a location where there's not benefit corporation, you can change your corporation statements to reflect commitment to broad stakeholders, not just shareholders. And from what I understand, I'm not a lawyer, but if it's an LLC, it's not that hard to do. Harder to do a little bit if you're a C corporation. But a benefit corporation does it automatically. So that's why that's a requirement.
So I want to get into like your favorites. We've talked kind of about the structure, but now I want to hear some of those great stories. So I know Patagonia is probably one of your favorites. So do you want to start there?
Yeah, sure.
And then let's talk about some other ones as well.
Sure. Yeah. So Patagonia is such an amazing company, in so many ways. So two things that really impressed me with Patagonia that I write about in the book. So one is that this idea that they have that you should buy better, not more. So they don't promote consumerism. Black Friday, they donate all of the sales or potentially profit to some of the charities they're involved in. Their ads, they encourage you to reuse, get things repaired. They have this awesome repair center. I mean, I have a lot of Patagonia coats and fleeces and clothes. And probably about 4 or 5 years ago, as I was really involved in this, I figured, well, and I teach Patagonia case. I should really test out their
Good. You're walking the talk.
Exactly. Okay. So nothing. Their stuff is super high quality, but I had gotten my pocket hooked on a door handle and it ripped the pocket. I figured, I'll see what happens. I'll send it back to them. So awesome, they're free. Next year I was having some problems with my snaps. I sent it back. So 3 years in a row, actually, right in the spring when I was done with my winter jacket, I sent it back to them and got it back, and it was as good as new. And they're totally right. I mean, there's no reason for me to ever at some point I'll have to get a new jacket, but at least for those things, easy to repair, such high quality material and merchandise already that it lasts a long time. So that's one of the things about Patagonia that this idea that one of the few companies that is promoting actually buying less and repairing their products. The second thing that I think is really such innovative and impactful about Patagonia is the advocacy they do. So they are front lines around a variety of particularly environmental issues. I think in the Trump administration, there's been sort of scaling back of national monuments, and they're out there, trying to actually get that reversed in the state legislatures and other places. And so, I think that companies that are out there in an advocacy role, that's one of the things that really impresses me.
And so now let's talk about some that maybe only a few people know about, but that really, touched you.
Yeah, so I don't know. So people might probably know about this company, Allbirds. It's less known than Patagonia. I wrote something up recently, and the person that read it hadn't heard of Allbirds, so that's why I know about it because I wear their shoes. I mean, a lot of my wardrobe is actually B corporations.
You're the B Corp model. Okay.
So Allbirds is a company, started out making footwear. The founders, sort of the idea behind it was, the footwear is an incredibly environmentally damaging industry. They have, like the leather, the processing of leather, the plastics, and other materials for the soles. So a real inspiration for the founders was, let's make a sustainable footwear. So the top part of the footwear is relatively easy to make sustainable. They made out of wool and trees, but the sole is always a huge challenge. And so, what did they do? They actually went out and did research and development and found a technology based on using sugarcane to make a carbon neutral sole for their shoe. And the thing why this is so impressive to me is they didn't say, okay, this is our IP, a key part of our product. They open sourced it and said, anyone can use this because the more people that use this, the better the world is. And so that's another sort of really telling anecdote. Another one, because I know people might know this one, that people don't know. So Roshan, have you heard of Roshan?
I love Roshan,
okay, so
but I know them. No. I just judged them in a PR awards contest many years ago. They're great.
Yeah. So this is the largest telecommunication provider in Afghanistan, a B Corp. There's all kinds of things in the community, healthcare. And you can imagine in a place like Afghanistan, actually access to telecommunications is in and of itself a social good. So, largest telecommunication manufacturer or provider in Afghanistan is another B Corp.
And can you say why what they're doing besides? I think that there's a lot of accessibility that they work on.
Right, accessibility. I know they're very active in their communities. I think there's some medical work that they're involved in as well. So so they're really another sort of impressive one.
So let's talk about let's talk about larger B Corps.
Sure.
Because I love to talk about Natura.
Yes.
I have been very fortunate, again, when I was at Edelman, to actually visit their corporate headquarters.
Cool.
For our listeners, they have amethysts and gems in all sorts of places around their factories to give out really good energy. So they're a wonderful company, but they also then they acquired Avon.
Right. Yeah.
So I'm curious about one, Natura, and being a very large B Corp and how they make that work. So let's do that part. And then how do you use B Corp status for acquisitions to evolve culture?
Yeah, so I think that's a great question. I mean, I think Natura, as you mentioned, and I've actually not visited their headquarters, so you might know more about them than I do. But the two things that I find so impressive about them is, so one, deep commitment to sort of natural, healthy ingredients, which there's another sort of beauty care company that I've been sort of interviewing a lot recently called Beauty Counter. And in learning a lot about sort of the work that they do around ingredients, also advocacy work. And it is really difficult and complex in that to have a well-performing sort of cosmetic and other type of beauty product that uses natural and environmentally friendly ingredients. So one thing, Natura has been a true pioneer in that. The second is, their sort of sales model is similar to Avon in having small, individual, mostly women entrepreneurs that are out there selling themselves in this, in the streets, in other people's homes, et cetera. And this they see as a real way to help sort of poor, disadvantaged people, give them some skills, give them a way to sort of provide for themselves economically. So that's another reason why. The third reason why, and actually I know I only said two, they've been real pioneers in transparency around sustainability. I think they're one of the first companies that actually integrated their social responsibility reporting with their financial reporting. So yeah, Natura is a true pioneer. And as you mentioned, they first purchased the Body Shop in the UK a number of years ago, and then more recently purchased Avon, which I think it'll be interesting. And I know that they're going to try to go for Benefit Corporation, B Corp certification for Avon as well, which I understand. So I think it's I think it's a great development, and more broadly, this idea of the use of B Corps around mergers and acquisitions is a whole other interesting topic because on the one hand, so one of the case studies that I did, a published Harvard case study, is on Danone North America's B Corp journey, and so Natura will be the largest B Corp after I think all the acquisitions settle. But currently, Danone, $6 billion subsidiary of the French Danone, and they actually went through the B Corp certification process while they were integrating a merger with WhiteWave. WhiteWave, which is like Silk and Horizon Milk, which I'm sure many people know. And they actually went, and we cover this a lot in the case study. Actually, the B Corp certification process is like a set of standards around management generally, and they found it to be hugely useful as they went through the merger and acquisition, because it was like a third-party standard almost of how to do things. So you didn't have, the WhiteWave standard competing against the, Danone standard. You had there was this third party that actually made it really useful. So I think, it'll be interesting to see how the Avon organization is integrated in there. And I think you had done some work with Avon a long time ago. Is that right,
Oh,
Carol?
we created the Breast Cancer Crusade, which raised over $1 billion around the globe, but that was in their heyday. So it'll be great to see what Natura can evolve them to. I would love to just, in the preface of your book, there was a great little statement in here by a French company, and I think it underscores what you're talking about in terms of management structure. And it's Chateau Marquis. And, they talked about why a French winery would want to receive a U.S.-based certification. And this is what Robert Eden, their founder, said. B Corp is a great roadmap to entice us and encourage us to take steps within our company to open up more to social and environmental aspects. It also allows us to put in place certain management tools so we become a more precise and more accurate in achieving our goals. Often in the early years of the social responsibility movement or the Be Good movement or whatever you want to call it, that there weren't a lot of accurate ways to judge the social and environmental impacts. And I think, because I remember being, talking with Anita Roddick and others and, Tom Chappell, where we're just doing it because it's the right thing to do. And their businesses were okay, but they were small and they were founders. But I remember so much skepticism around the larger corporations we were working with, because they were looking at the smaller ones and saying, it's the founders. Can you talk about how getting the B Corp certification and the process of recertification every 3 years and the assessment, how that truly puts B Corp's feet to the fire to be accountable and to measure?
Yeah, I mean, exactly. And put feet to the fire is a strong way to put it, but I do think that, the accountability, the measurement, accountability, and transparency is the core of this in many ways. And it's something that it goes beyond just even the social and environmental governance factors, it's actually why I titled the book Better Business, because so many of the companies I talked to said, this is not even something that made us better socially and environmentally, but it's actually made us a better business. And so, and as I've been doing a variety of new interviews with B Corps, and one of the ones I recently did was with a LA-based, really innovative venture capital firm called Fifth Wall, and their LPs are all the big property owners, and they're working or property developers, and they're working to sort of identify sort of key new technology for the real estate industry. Really a sort of really top VC firm, but traditional VC firm, and they do have investments in two B Corps, Allbirds and Cotopaxi, and they learned about the B Corp certification. And they said, you know what? Actually, this sounds like a really smart thing for us to do, and something we believe in this as individuals, even though we're not a social business. And they're now a B Corp, and a number of actually the VC firms that I've talked to, the same thing. And many VC firms have their portfolio companies do it also as a way, not just for due diligence, but also as a way for them to, sort of learn about becoming a better business. So I think you're right. I mean, it is, sort of what you measure matters, and going through this process really helps companies in their accountability, in their just overall way to manage the company.
Okay, so let's talk about, we were talking about Natura and foreign companies. I want to talk about I think the last time we emailed, you were off in China.
Yeah. Right.
So, why did you go to China? You spent a lot of time there. I know that you're looking at the nascent evolution of the B Corp movement there. So why did you go there? And then what are you seeing?
A big focus of my research, obviously, is B Corps, but it's within a larger set of work on social responsible business, environmental sustainability, and more generally, just reforming capitalism to be much more stakeholder driven. And sort of a couple things really intrigued me about China. So one is from the environment situation. So people have probably, if they've been to China, they've experienced it, or maybe seen pictures. The environment there, natural environment, air quality, water pollution, is really a problem. And so as me, someone who cares about this, I feel like this is someplace where I can actually maybe make a difference. I think also one of the reasons why I think it's possible to make a difference is that the government, for the most part, I think it really understands that this is an issue and that it's not something that is sustainable long term. And they want to actually keep growing in a sustainable way. And the citizenry, as sort of in general income has increased, people are demanding much better environment. So the government, and it's a very top-down place there. I mean, if the government wants to do something, it can happen. So, and it really actually has gotten a lot better in the last number of years. And so one reason I would go to China is that there is, just a great sort of laboratory to understand how to actually become more environmentally friendly. And I think that a lot has happened there. But like you mentioned, I also studied a little bit about B Corps in China, and the one of the Harvard case studies I have is on First Respond, which is the first B Corp in China, and I talk a little bit about them in the book as well. But one of the really exciting things there too is that because of the limitations on like civil society and NGOs, much of the young people that are just passionate about giving back and having a social, have a social conscience in sort of what they buy and what they do, they actually find businesses to do this. And so this idea of actually social purpose businesses is widespread there because of these limitations on civil society and NGOs. And so that's a whole other really interesting infrastructure and ecosystem with a lot of vibrancy. So another sort of thing that excites me quite a bit.
So you talked about young people.
Yes.
And you talk about that the next generations are truly the ones that, they can work for, buy from, advocate for, and that they need to use this agency to truly have an impact. Can you talk about your view of the role of young people, whether they start a B Corp or they don't, and why you're so optimistic about the future.
Yeah. So I think, one of the reasons, I guess, why I'm so optimistic is that I've seen this through my students. I've been teaching about 15 years now, and just how the attention this has gotten over the years has just increased dramatically. And people seem much more passionate about it. The students, they make job choices because of these factors. They buy products because of these factors, sort of social and environmental impact. This came through very loud and clear in, the interviews and research I did for the book. So many of the B Corps, say, they basically don't have any hiring issues because people rarely leave. And when they do, so many people want to work for a B Corp that there's people sort of pounding down their doors. I think that the sort of conscious consumerism is lagging a little bit. I do think that people are really interested in buying from companies that do well. I mean, there's a lot of surveys that show that. But I think part of it is, and I think this is one of the reasons why I hope the B Corp movement will continue to scale, is that the issue of authenticity and how you can actually tell if a company's doing good. I think that's less clear, and so I think that as people get to know more about the B logo and they can tell, I think that conscious consumerism will increase. The third point on that, around the sort of millennials and Gen Z, and this is something even Larry Fink in his letter about companies being more purpose-driven and accountable around that. He's big on accountability around it as well. Is that these generations are going to be inheriting like $30 to $40 trillion, and the extent to which the sustainable, focused investment, both in the public markets but also in the private markets, has taken off. I mean, this fifth wall example, other VCs as an example in the private markets, all kinds of sustainable, mutual funds and investments. So, Larry Fink, the biggest asset manager, head of BlackRock, biggest asset manager, is calling for this. So, I think that, all these trends really point in a good direction. And I do think that these young people are at the leading edge of it.
How many of your students feel that they have to start their own company to truly live their own values and their view of a more socially and environmentally sustainable world?
I don't think so. I think a lot of students nowadays want to start their own company, without a doubt. And I teach. One of the classes I teach is on social entrepreneurship, so I attract a lot of people that are interested in that. I do think, though, that people are also interested in, I think that the rise of the B Corp is an example of this. I mean, so, I know in this last year I was teaching some of the students. One is talking to Allbirds, another talking to Eileen Fisher, SC Johnson. There's a deep connection with the business school and SC Johnson, and they have a variety of sort of longstanding social responsible programs. So I think that I think that entrepreneurship is hot and has been hot for a while, and I think that it is a way for individuals to live their values. But I think that people also feel they can find that in larger companies or smaller B Corp type companies as well.
And so, in terms of what can large companies learn from B Corps, and specifically, I'm going to bridge it to your book,
sure,
because it's a great book. And what do you wish the takeaway for large companies will be when they read your book, since it's all about the B Corp movement?
So the B Corp, and why I call it actually the B Corp movement, is because I feel that it is not just about B Corps. So as you mentioned, and it sounds like a large number, 3,500 or so. To me, that actually sounds like a small number compared to how many companies there are in the world. And I certainly hope the book goes on to influence more than 3,500 companies. Sort of the way the thesis of the book in some ways is that, maybe not all companies can be B Corps, but all companies can be more like B Corps. And what B Lab and the community of B Corps has done is they've created a series of processes, systems, tools where all companies can be more like B Corps. This could be the benefit corporation law. which, 10, definitely over 10,000. It's because it's all dispersed across U.S. states and different countries. It's hard to have a whole count, but definitely over 10,000 companies have adopted that form. I think over 50,000 companies use the B impact assessment to manage their manage their company in some way. There's this increasing focus from Danone and many of the other large companies as well. The Business Roundtable focus on shareholder, shifting from shareholder primacy to stakeholders. I think, it's a real, I feel bad for those folks. I think that they've come under some critique when I think they had good intentions. Critique being that, like, how are you going to be accountable for this? I think that actually a lot of the tools in the B Corp movement will be very useful for many of these large companies to sort of walk the talk and actually be a little accountable for what they're saying. And I think that also, it's a big ask to think, okay, we're going to become stakeholder driven. Well, like, how do you do that? Well, actually, there is a playbook for how to do it, and it's actually the B impact assessment.
Talk a little bit about the playbook. Are you saying the assessment in B Lab is the playbook, or is there another playbook?
Sure. So a couple of things. So I guess I guess the type of company and where they're starting, there's different sort of playbooks. So I would say in general, if it was going to be senior managers, I would say something like the trying to work through the B impact assessment is one way to try to reorient the company around stakeholder driven. I think with the examples of Danone, and I don't think it's publicly announced yet, but there are going to be some other bigger companies that are coming on board in a new program that B Lab is going to have, and so this is, and they're designing new ways for large companies to actually become part of this movement. And so, it's so I do think that the B impact assessment is in some ways the playbook, although as you mentioned, it's very complicated, sort of complex to go through. But forthcoming, there'll be a few other things that they specifically positioned against large companies, ways to sort of start down the path slowly, because large companies are like giant ships. I mean, you can't really turn them very quickly. I mean, you have to do things very, very slowly, and understandably.
So how do we? So it's great and encouraging to hear that B Lab is creating some new ways to invite companies in, but again, the challenge for a lot of up and coming, the hypos in the companies, they need to reach the C-suite with these messages. And so have you seen a situation where, you had this young high potential and they talked to so-and-so and so-and-so, or they sent them, obviously buy a lot of your books. I got that. Right. but are there any other insights about how do you, break in the idea and then nurture it to fruition?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think, there is one example I know of where, I think I have a couple examples now that I think about it. So these I have secondhand, so I won't sort of list the company names, but they're
tell me the industry.
Yeah. So one is sort of natural care products, sort of well-known company in that space. Older generation that we've been doing this forever. We don't need this third party to tell us that we're good. Younger generation sort of caught wind of this, became enthusiastic about it, and over a number of years was able to finally convince sort of the older generation. So and actually that company's now B Corp after many, many years. Another one, there's actually was a company contest, like, what innovation to do, what innovation can the company do to become better performing? And there was a movement among the employees for B Corporation status to be actually what ends up winning that internal competition. And it actually ended up finishing second. But the CEO said, there's so much passion around this, we're going to go ahead and do it. So
are those two stories in your book?
The second story is in my book.
So I know, let's talk a little bit about creating a movement, because I've been trying to create a movement for social purpose for 30 years. The B Lab has partners, and you also mention them in the book. Others that help amplify practice, etc. And I know they talk about the B team. I know that they're working with sustainable brands. How important is it to have this army of like-minded organizations to ignite and to build the momentum for the movement?
Oh my goodness, exactly. And that's exactly what's the most essential thing. I mean, I think you can't have a movement without the movement, basically. Yeah. So in sociology, which is my PhD, there is a study of social movements, and everything from the civil rights movement, to women's rights movement, all kind the more recent, gay rights, et cetera. And there is like sort of coalescing around sort of what the three characteristics to actually have a successful social movement are. So one is, I mean, it's called sort of, the opportunity structure is, but it's like, you need to focus, you need to time things in the right way. And you can see this now with all the focus on, systemic, racial injustice. With, there was this event that catalyzed people and coalesced or in a way that can actually lead to bigger movements. The second characteristic is how messages are framed, and this is something I think the B Corp movement was very successful in. Like, for instance, in passing the laws, they're for the passing of venture corporation laws, they didn't say, okay, everyone should, state you should adopt this socially responsible business. No, it was framed as entrepreneurs should be able to have a choice to incorporate how they want. And by that framing, actually, you look at, Mike Pence, Nikki Haley, signed on to this law in their states of Indiana and South Carolina, Deval Patrick on the other side. So, they've been able to get 36 governors of all political persuasion to sign these laws, because I think of the framing of it, that it's about entrepreneurial choice. The third category, which gets to your question, is mobilizing structures. How you're able to actually create and energize a diverse network towards your goals. And this is, I think, the thing that B Lab has been the most amazing. You mentioned the great work they've done in connecting to other, in some ways, parallel movements and organizations. But the thing that I've interviewed probably 100 B Corps by now, many people at a number of those companies, and the commitment and passion of these individuals, not just to the movement in general. And so, this is one of the reasons why I end up writing the book, is because it's like, wow, there is such incredible passion, because it's a movement, because this network is energized. People are seeing this as something that is making a difference beyond them. And so I agree that the mobilizing a network of actors is absolutely essential to a movement.
It looks like you're building the steam. You're building the momentum. Here we have the 50th anniversary of Milton Friedman's famous essay, "It's Only About the Shareholders." You've got Larry Fink, the Business Roundtable at WEF declarations, and you got a huge new generation demanding this. So what do you fear is going to get in the way of this truly becoming the way to do business, the new form of capitalism?
Yeah, I think that, complacency and inertia, rigidity is, I think, the really difficult. So I think that it's just natural for businesses to keep doing things the way they do them. And I think that, in some ways, a lot of change models are like tipping point models, where, there's a slow growth, and then all of a sudden something happens and it goes much faster, the growth rate. And so I think that the B Lab is approaching this tipping point. And, certainly, one of my favorite people to talk to about this is someone named Lorna Davis, who was the CEO of Danone North America, and she then left that position. Is now a global ambassador for B Lab and working with the large companies with B Lab. And she tells me, and I close with a quote from her in this Stanford Social Innovation Review article that I have coming out. She says, 20, 30 years from now, people are going to say, you did business in another way. That's crazy. And this is the way to do business. And I do hope that we reach that, sort of tipping point and get to there. But I think that, if we don't all keep sort of the pedal to the metal, so to speak, and that this is something that inertia and complacency will overcome. And so I do think that maybe some of these successes, like you're mentioning, Larry Fink and Danone, might slow down the pressure around this, because I think that it's something that we need to keep really pushing very hard on.
And you also talk about just general people, that, it's students, it's companies, and that people have their wallets. Again, they have their agency. And so, you in your book, in your introduction, you say citizens must speak up with their voices. The system cannot change itself. Only we can.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Thinking back all the time that I've spent with you, Carol. So I'm from the organizations area. And so I see things much more from the employee standpoint and culture. And you are much more from the sort of marketing communications angle, and see much more, I think, things from the consumer side. And I've learned so much about like sort of marketing and messaging and ways of convincing consumers around purpose from you. And I think this is the future of what we need to do, actually. And so, I'm not as expert in this as you, so I'd really also look to you to help lead us around this, because it's something that you're exactly right. I mean, I think if we don't convince consumers, this will never have the traction that it needs to.
Well, I think more companies doing it right and being authentic is going to be helpful. I think that, I've got a very simple construct, and I talk about, people always talk about storytelling.
Right.
And I'm talking about, no, you need to story live. So companies need to be story living.
Right.
And when they do that, the whole movement now today is about acting. The Business Roundtable, great declaration, but the big criticism and the I don't know is, are they going to walk the talk?
Right.
And so I think that, again, citizens, and we've got a couple big ideas that we're cooking up about giving, again, more voice and sharing more transparency. And the great thing that I'm seeing is that, the research that we did in 1993, the Cohn-Roper report, the first one we did, that said after price and quality and customer service, a company engaged with a cause, someone's going to buy that one.
Right.
And yeah, years and years and years, people said that, but now they're doing it. And they're also, again, demanding. I mean, I know that listening to Paul Pullman, and I love to, and I had that moment in time I worked with him, but he's so proud of one of his legacies at Unilever is that Unilever is in LinkedIn is the number one most demanded, requested consumer packaged goods company in 50 countries.
Wow.
In 50 countries, because they live their story, and then they tell great stories. So, I think that the book is going to be extraordinary. Tell me, what are your dreams for this book? Let's say I want to have you back a year from now.
Yeah. You're
going to do this tour and whatever. We're going to find some great results. What do you wish will happen from this book, the release of the book, and a lot of people reading it?
I think the most direct thing, I think that if large companies like the Business Roundtable would take the messages of the book seriously, like I could imagine, I don't know, some, workshops, seminars, other ways of really trying to diffuse these ideas into large companies, I think is one thing that I think that would be, huge success. I think too, general public understanding like what the B logo means in a way that they actually can look for that, to know that that lets an authentically good product, to know what's what, yeah. So back in 1993, people want to understand, sort of the, sort of final purpose, but actually telling like what is good is complex and hard at times. And so I think that's sort of another thing. If the general public can come to understand that they should be buying products based on their values, and the B is one way to identify companies that are socially and environmentally responsible. That would be another good outcome.
In our show note, we're going to put, information to link to the book. We're going to put, a few of the other things that you've done so well, your bio and such, Chris. But we want to wish you incredible success. We know you're going to have it. And so I always like to let my guests, you get to end with 3 insights. Now, the question is, you got insights for general companies, you got insights for social entrepreneurs. So I'm going to let you pick who you want to share your gem insights with, and then what are they?
3 insights. These are maybe not sort of the deepest insights, but I do think that accountability matters, and I think this is, and I say this out there to the big companies, the business roundtable folks. You need to be accountable for, walk the talk, as you just said, Carol. I think, too, that, and this is for large companies and smaller companies, that actually doing this work around social and environmental and governance makes the company as a whole better. And this is something that all of, many of these venture capital companies that I'm mentioned have come to think. I mean, Larry Fink emphasizes this in his letters, and I guess the third one, and this goes back to my PhD in sociology. Those of you in movement building, you can learn from the famous movements of the civil rights movement, gay rights movement, women's movements. Latch on to key events. Be careful about your framing, and get diverse and powerful networks behind you, and that's really the key to achieving a social movement.
So I'm going to just say, is there anything else that you want to share with our listeners before we have to say goodbye?
Nope, that's it. It was just a real honor, Carol, to be here. I mean, a real sort of hero and pioneer for me in this space, and so it's great to talk to you about this. So thank you very much.
Oh, it's my pleasure, Chris. And I think that you are as much a pioneer. You are driving this forward in a enticing way, in a great storytelling way. I want everybody who's listening to go out and buy the book. I want the folks at Net Impact to make sure that every single one of their members, which are, socially responsible MBAs and early stage professionals, I'll connect you to a few of my other networks, because I think that that every time we take a step forward like this, I mean, really taking your great brain and your analysis and then your storytelling and great writing and putting it into something like this, it really does accelerate this movement about a new way of capitalism that is no longer on the fringe, but is mainstream. So you're going to be one of the OGs of the movement. I just anointed you.
Okay.
Last year at Sustainable Brands, they gave me an anointing next to Paul Hawken and Paul Pullman and God Cohen. So we all need each other. Thank you so much for being on my podcast. We're going to promote the heck out of this. I can't wait to see September 13 and all of the point counterpoint about Milton Friedman. I know you're going to lead this, and we're going to have you back. So,
Great.
9 months or a year, we're going to have you back, and we're going to see how many more companies are becoming B Corps. So I just like to say to our listeners, go on to, please give us a review on, wherever you listen to your podcasts. Also give us ideas to interview other people like Chris and like others who are truly pioneers doing amazing work. And at the end, I just want to ask all of you, what is your purpose?